A teacher, coach, affects eternity. He never knows where his influence stops. It's a great quote by Henry Adams. Today in the Pro Talk podcast, we get to talk to a coach who's influenced his players for over 35 years. But before we meet today's guest, make sure you push the subscription button as well as that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Pro Talk podcast. The sport of baseball. Do you realize at the professional level, when you're at the plate, if you succeed only 3 out of 10 times, you're headed to the Hall of Fame? It's a sport where you have thousands and thousands of failures. What other sport or profession can you fail over 70% of the time and still keep your job? You win because you fail. It reminds me of a song by Aerosmith. Remember that song, Dream On, and the great lyric, "You've got to lose to know how to win"? Well, today, our guest is a college coach whose teams have won over 500 games. And in those 500 games, he's seen thousands and thousands and thousands of failures. He's somebody I've looked up to my whole life. I can say that. Why? Because he's my older brother, Rick. Bro, what's up?
How you doing?
I'm great.
Actually, I look up to you. You're taller.
Yeah, well, I won't let everybody know about the times I was beat up and the character that I was developed. But hopefully this goes well. I know Mom will like the episode if nobody else does. So you've coached over 35 years and your teams have won over 500 games. I got to ask you right away, and people want to know, which is greater, the satisfaction or gratification of winning, or what's greater, that or the pain of losing?
I'd have to say the gratification of winning, but I'd have to say the ultimate, as a college coach is, you seeing your athletes move on into the real world. I mean, we're at Division III. I've had 3 guys play pro baseball, but only for a couple of years and unaffiliated. But it's mostly the teaching and, the competitiveness they get from playing the game, and a game based on failure, learning how to face adversity, learning how to bounce back, so they can take it into the real world, I think it's the influence you have on others that's your greatest triumph. One of the things I brag about all the time, it's not the 500 wins or whatever. I've been to 55 weddings of former players. And that's huge to me. And at the same time, of those 55 weddings, 54 of them are still going strong. And I think that's important because of what they learn through the game. Coaches oftentimes take a lot of heat for things that they're not really responsible for. And at the same time, they get a lot of credit for the things that they didn't really do either. But that's always been my goal. I used to say when I was at Bethany, trying to turn young men into productive members of society. And now at Franciscan, I've got those kids because they're there because of their faith, but let them move on and progress to what they want to do.
That's great. So I didn't know you were a marriage counselor on the side. So 54 out of 55?
It had nothing to do with that.
That's pretty high batting percentage right there.
Yeah.
That's amazing. 55 weddings. Wow. All right. So going back, I, of course, know your background, but let's start with, you played in college at Maryville College. So you're a college player, and you played for your first year under Pat Murphy, who is now manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. What was that experience like?
Honestly, it was, outside of my faith and my family, the most positive influence in my life. And it's something I refer back to all the time. And you left out that he's a 2-time manager of the year in the National League, but his influence, and he'll tell everybody, and he says it publicly now, and that he wasn't a very good coach back then, but the difference he made on the lives of everybody who's ever played for him is just absolutely phenomenal. He saw in me a young kid that had a lot of desire, not a whole lot of ability, but a lot of desire. And he said, you got to learn to believe in yourself and, use that passion, to get what you want out of life. And, I have. And the thing is, I was a business major, started off in retail sales. That wasn't me, I called and asked him for advice. He said, I think you make a great coach someday, and I'll be honest, like what I just said about, having an influence in the lives of others. I told Murphy one time, about 3 or 4 years after I found the coaching profession, I said, I got to pay you back for this. And he goes, you'll never be able to pay me back. You just do it for somebody else. And then, honestly, that's my goal, is to be somebody else's Coach Murphy.
I need to ask you because I've never asked you this, but when you watch a game, obviously he's got the so-called game face. He looks like he's going to tear someone's head off. I know since I boxed with him once, but he was he a gentle coach? Because when you see him interviewed, you see a different side of him, and you think, "Wow, what an amazing guy." Was he intimidating? Because he sure looks it.
Oh, well, there's a question about that. And everybody will tell you that. At the same time, it was that tough love, and it was, people think sometimes, when you're an intimidating force, that's always negative. It wasn't. I mean, it was all positive. He said, matter of fact, his main message to me was you got to learn to believe in yourself. Okay. You got to stop letting people put you down. Right. And again, like you said, with the game being failure based, don't let that bother you. You've got it inside of you, right? You have this passion, let it out. And don't accept failure as anything fatal. And it was hard. It pushed you to places you didn't think you could go, but that's not a negative, and I can speak for the thousands of players that he's coached. Every one of us is grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's awesome. You mentioned that, like I did, we spent about 30 seconds in the corporate world and said where our heart was is in coaching. I did not know that he gave you that advice. That's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so starting your head coaching career, you were at Bethany College. And for those that don't know the lay of the landscape, Bethany College is what level of NCAA?
Division III.
Okay, so Division III. I remember talking to our father about this one time, saying that it's going to be very difficult to win at that level because the really good pitchers are at Division I or they're in the minor leagues. So how in the world do you win 500 games? What do you win, 10-8 every game? How's that work?
No, people get the wrong It's a big misconception about Division III athletics. No, they're not getting paid to play, and I mean, NIL is legal now, but that doesn't really happen at the smaller schools and things. But just because you're not on scholarship doesn't mean you're not a good athlete. It's not intramurals by any stretch of the imagination. But the one thing that people don't realize is that everybody in Division III is non-scholarship. Okay, so yeah, I'm not getting pitchers that throw in the 90s, but hopefully I get some 85, 86 because that's what my opponents have. And it's not always about how hard you throw or anything like that. It's a lot of it too is about character. I've had my chances to move to go Division II, Division I earlier in my career, but I honestly believe in Division III philosophy. My kids go to school. I just did my team's fall grade point average is a 3.12, which is a little low for us, honestly, but they're going to be productive members of society, and so Division III is not, like I said, it takes a bad rap from time to time because colleges are so expensive. They think athletics is a way to pay for college, but at the same time, it's a competitive brand of baseball. And last year's MLB draft, there were 12 Division III players taken.
Wow.
So and people also don't see the ugly side of Division II, Division I. Where that when they give you money, they own you. My players are human beings, not pieces of meat, not property.
Right. So you started out Bethany. I know you're very humble. And when I was doing research on you, not many of your awards are listed anywhere. And I know you have numerous awards because I've seen them that you've sent home to mom and dad. You had 448 wins, most in PAC, which is your conference history. You were the coach of the year 5 times. Most importantly, you had 105 all PAC players and 7 MVPs. Now, your program, when you started, your program was pretty bad, to be honest with you. It was
Yeah.
weak. It was
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah.
So how do you create that winning culture? If I'm a young coach, what do I do?
Well, I'll quote Lou Holtz, somebody I've looked up to and researched and things like that. I don't know him, but he always said, who are you? Where do you want to go? And what's it going to take to get there? Right. And I think that's the basis for any culture. And then you have to realize, like, who are you? Where are you? Well, Bethany was in a remote area of West Virginia, and there's not even a gas station in town, and we're 50 miles from Pittsburgh, PA. So I was getting a lot of blue collar, hard nosed Pittsburgh kids in Ohio. Everybody was from around 200 miles. And okay, that's your identity. We're a blue collar, hardworking type of outfit. and you know, I think that's the basis for any culture, but you also have to adapt it, particularly at the college level, as to what your institution wants. Now that I'm at Franciscan, we're faith based first, right? And that's the type of kid I'm going after. I have 22 different states represented on the roster now, complete 180 from where I was before. And how do you blend in the two kids from California, the two kids from Florida, the two kids from here, New York, New Hampshire, all that bit? How do you get them to buy into one specific goal? I mean, that's your first challenge. And Bethany had 6 coaches in 5 years. Prior to me, they needed somebody young. They hired me at 25 years old. It's fine. Um, you know, and then when I took the challenge of Franciscan, they dropped their baseball program in 2011, right? So in some ways, starting from the ground up is another way to build the culture. So I think that's kind of universal for all sports, but then each sport is unique. In tennis, is a little bit different. If I was coaching a college tennis team, be thankful I'm not. You see me play. It would be a little bit different to do. I've always believed in baseball as a team game. you know, Part of handling adversity is to pick up your teammates and have your teammates pick you up. And we can do that a little bit more in a more of a team sport than an individual sport.
Well, one of my questions here is about mental toughness. What do you say to a kid that's struggling? He's 0 for 12 and he's a kid that can play. I mean, what do you say? Is that something that you've learned from Coach Murphy, or, you know, what have you learned along the way? What do you say to a kid who's really down in the dumps?
That's real tough, and I think if there was one great answer to solve it, the problems everybody would have that, and that's the hardest part of coaching. But I think it's you try to maximize on the individual strengths, whatever they may be, try to block the negative out, and you try to push them as best you can positively, again, like Coach Murphy did with us. But there's no magic pill or magic words that you can say. I've often said to the different people, if you're in there, that means I believe in you, and I can't give you self-confidence. That's something, by definition, you have to have self-confidence. And obviously when times are down, that's when mental toughness needs to show up. Anybody can have it when you're going well, and then the other thing is, and this as a teacher, you pick on, you start working on the weaknesses, but simply one step at a time. Okay, now that we've accomplished this, let's go to the next one. We've done some things like, for example, baseball when they're in a slump. I've told a kid, turn the bat around, you're using the wrong side of the bat. It's stupid, but it has worked before. You're hitting it with the wrong side of the bat, spin it around. And it's just something that gets the mental block and frees it up. We do a lot of things. Ken Ravizza was a well-renowned sports psychologist, and he passed away a couple years ago. But I looked at all his stuff and things, and getting comfortable when you're uncomfortable, or being comfortable when you're in an uncomfortable setting. Trying to find little positives here or there to work on it. One of the things I've always told my players and the guys that go in the Hall of Fame, it's amazing to me how they always say, Carver used to say, control the controllables. What can you control? Particularly in baseball, you mentioned 3 out of 10, you're in the Hall of Fame. Okay. Can you control that you get a hit on every time? No. All you can control is that you had a good swing. Can you control what the other guy's throwing? No. All you can control is yours. And I would think too, in your game, tennis, that's a lot of it too. Know who you are and, where you want to go. And, but control what you can control. We play up here in the north in just absolute terrible weather, and I always say, hey, both teams are playing in it. The team that ignores the weather has the better chance to be successful. So
I think that's great. And I was talking to a player today about the wind down here down south, that we never mention the weather. That's just something that your
yeah,
opponent's got to talk about, and that becomes a real monkey on that person's back.
yeah. And I've done a lot of. I mean, first of all, like as a coach, you should never stop learning. Once you think you know it all, it's time to get out. And for 35 years, and I've been a member of the ABCA for 38 consecutive years now. That's coming up next week. I have to pick up something every convention to get myself better, and slumps. How do you get a kid out of a funk here or there? And I the my most favorite talks now are not on techniques of the game; it's on the mental side. You know, and there's one every year, and then I follow up, and I normally show it to my guys too because I think it's important that they don't just hear it; they see it from somebody else.
I noticed one of your first seasons that you did something, if you could explain this to people, that in between innings, your team took the field and all the players that were on the bench jogged to the foul pole and came back. What's up with that?
I like to say I invented the mid-inning trot. I don't really do it anymore, but everybody else is doing it now. It seems like it. My thought was, okay, look, if we're not doing well, there's a chance I may take this guy out of the game. So you better get loose if you're on the bench. And then if we are doing well, you're probably going to go in anyway, right? So let's just keep you loose and doing it. And you know, honestly, part of it was due to the cold weather. I mean, look, I don't want to see guys sitting there for like freezing to death the whole 9 innings. That's a long time. Keep yourself loose, you get there. And then the thing is, I think, when you get them moving around again, they're going to be a little bit more supportive as teammates. So I don't know how that ever came about. I just decided one day just to do it. And we did it for a number of years. And now I see everybody doing it, particularly like bullpen guys. But I think physiologically, it keeps them loose and let them know that. And again, our game is the trouble with you mentioned the failure, but it's also such a slow pace game. I mean, anybody calls it boring to me is out of their mind because there's so many things that could happen on one pitch.
Right.
All right. The only one can. Okay. But you have to be trying to be prepared for what could happen. Okay. But the action, it's not like a tennis or a basketball or soccer or even a football where we got a play coming every 30 seconds. You have to, keep yourself mentally in tune for it, right? To be ready when your time comes, and that's part of the mid-inning trot. So,
So it keeps the players engaged mentally through the
eh,
physical action.
you know, you know, you know,
Well, let's take everybody back when you started, because the culture today, before we even talk about the way parents are and coaches are and leagues are, when you started playing baseball at what age?
5.
5. Okay. Um, and you played baseball up north until you moved south in high school. So when did your baseball season start?
Well, back then, March, April, something like that. Started practice, high school and things like that, February, but that was Georgia. So maybe we started end of January. In Maryville, we normally start mid-January and start having games in February. I'd love to be able to do that here, but our first practice is January 27th, and that'll be inside, I guarantee you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the game's evolved. Every sport's evolved now. I'm like your friend John Smoltz. I advocate for everybody playing as many sports as possible. At the same time, you do need the off season, right, to get yourself better, and sports have become year round. So, it's almost a year round clock nowadays. The big leagues, they tell Joel Hanrahan, the Pirates former closer, I met with him a couple times, and he said that they don't want me picking up a ball in November or December. He did it anyway,
Yeah.
but they need to rest, and
Mm-hmm.
you also need to be more well rounded.
Yeah. So what was your best memory as a little baseball player?
As a baseball player, best
Yeah.
memory,
Yeah.
um, wow, that's a tough one. As a player, probably my freshman year in college in 1983, Lynchburg was ranked third in the nation, and our ace, I was a DH the first game. We lost 18-1. And everybody thought our number two was going to throw the second game because we had a doubleheader the next day as well. Murphy gave me the ball, and I won't say exactly what he said to me, but shove this ball someplace. And I went out and threw a three-hitter, and we won the game 3-1,
Nice.
after losing 18-1. The thing that why that's so special was an underdog role, but just maybe 10 months before that, my high school coach said I was too small to play at the next level, and to go in that amount of time, just 10 months to beat the number 3 team in the nation is Yeah, there's a sense of overcoming adversity right there that, inside, you know,
Did you send them the press clipping?
yeah, I did.
Nice.
Yeah, but, I don't know, I mean, it's that again, the will to fight back and, just to always be successful. I mean, as a coach in the championships and things like that, but a lot of times it's just watching the players and seeing that. And I know in my 2000 back-to-back PAC title teams from Bethany, first COVID was a 20-year, and then we just had a 25-year. It was a Zoom reunion rather than getting together because there. But it seeing how much they remember and the times they had as teammates. That's makes I wouldn't trade $10 million for that. And and the funny thing is too, and this is why I'm always been a big team guy, the bullpen catcher on that team, he had one at bat his whole 4-year college career. But it was a very good bullpen catcher. He was a diabetic kid, and every time he gave himself a shot, he got a little bit high and he started screaming and yelling and stuff like that. But he was the one that provoked all these rallies. Well, 20 years after we won the back-to-back titles, because we had to come back, we were down 6 runs in each game and came back and won each, and we had a sweep doubleheader. He's still the star of the show, of the reunion. What's Engel doing? He was the comic relief back then, but he's he's as big a part of the team as the guy, the 6 all conference, first team all conference players and the league MVP, right? And that to me is what coaching is all about, you know. And the guys getting together. The other thing is when tragedy happens in players' lives and things like that, and like I mentioned, the weddings, but the weddings are the grooms were all teammates, and some of these, when Dad passed away, I can't tell you the emails and calls and things like that I got from former players. You're there for your teammate for the rest of their lives, and that's something that why I'm in sports. I know you can get it probably in some other areas, but sports is what brings that out.
When you were a little kid, though, I knew baseball was your love. Did you play travel ball or is that around?
No, travel ball didn't exist back then. But again, there too. I mean, because I was only 5'9", 135 pounds out of high school. But it was even smaller. Puberty. I was a late bloomer. When I got cut when I was 13, the guy said it was too small. And then at 14, his son walked to me with the bases loaded to win the championship. So there's a little bit of revenge there, and and then is it high school? I mean, again, I could play, but not an all-star or anything. But you can't measure a person's heart, and I believe that should be and I think tennis too. Obviously, you get a little bit more leverage on your serve if you're taller, but that doesn't mean you can't. If you're smaller, you got to be a little quicker, right?
Who was your, growing up, sports wise, who was your greatest influence?
Growing up. Well, probably my dad, because he never let me settle for anything. I mean, what it was like, with report cards brought home. I bring home all A's and a B, and what'd you get the B for? You bring home all B's and a C, and or all C's and a B, and you get congratulated for getting that B. Um, you know, um,
That's more the truth right there.
yeah, but no, I mean, he always pushed me to keep doing better, and again, like it was always that positive. You can still, there's still more to do. Right, and that's you mentioned the awards or whatever that, Johnny Wooden once said that, if what you did yesterday still looks good, you haven't done much today, right? So, like I said, that those awards mean more to my parents and family than they ever will to me, and you gotta keep moving on, and that's something Dad instilled in us.
Hmm.
That's why you're a pro tennis player, right? I mean, so
Well, speaking of awards, growing up, did you get trophies for anything besides first and second place?
no, no, and, along with that, this generation, the participation trophy generation, drives me crazy. The one thing I'm real proud of my son more than anything is when he was 10, travel ball, they finished second in the tournament and they got these big, I mean, big rings, like bigger than some of the World Series rings. They were knockoffs. They weren't pure gold or whatever. And he came home and said, "Dad, I don't want this. We shouldn't get this for second place." Right, and, I said, "Yeah, that's right." And, I said, "Keep that." So, um, I mean, I think there might be a place for it in some situations, but I think if I think that's one thing that hurts mental toughness. If you dummy down everything, well, you tried, okay, yeah, you did. I mean, there's stuff to be said for that, but again, if you keep pushing success, I think that's going to help your mental toughness.
Hmm. Now, is there a difference looking back when you started coaching? The college kid that lost when you started coaching, is there a difference in behavior, the way they handle losing today, or is it different back then?
Yeah, I think so. Um, yeah, I mean, I know my early years of my career, I didn't have to say it, but a bad loss, and don't get me wrong, losing is part of the game, especially in baseball. Okay, Jim Tracy, former Pirates manager, used to say, "You're going to win 1/3, you're going to lose 1/3, and so what you do with that 1/3 that's in the middle, it determines your success." And you do have bad days, and like you said, some days the failures outweigh the successes. But early in my career, most of the guys knew, like especially on losing on a road game, that bus would better be quiet on the way back.
Mm.
Because if you can blow it off that quickly, right, it didn't mean that much to you. Um, that looks cold hearted nowadays, but um, I think that this group blows things off a little bit faster than I think. Some people may say that's a good thing. I don't know, but I remember when I met my wife. We started dating in January, and early February came along, and I said, "I really like you, but I don't think this is going to work." And she goes, "Why?" And I said, "I'm a terrible boyfriend this time of year because I'm getting ready for the season." I said, "I may tell you I'm going to call, but if we lose the game, I don't talk to anybody." And I said, "That's cost me relationships in the past," and I said, "This it's all on me." And she said, "Well, fine. If you feel like calling, call." And Melanie, I mean, it was funny. Every time I called her, she was watching a Pirate game. So, um, I said, "Hey, there's something there." So, but
So she liked to watch losing too, I guess.
I guess,
That's a
yeah,
bad
so that
joke.
losing never bothered her, right?
Okay, so when you talk about kids losing travel ball, how many kids? And this came to mind 2 weeks ago. I was hitting with a buddy of mine. His kid is a pitcher in college. He is now pitching as a freshman. He had to sit out his spring season because he had Tommy John at age 17. How many did you see that a lot up north too? That these kids are having Tommy John?
I've had 2 in my career, and I never wanna see a 3rd. I would rather have 5 straight winless seasons than to see another kid with that sling, standing there on the sidelines. It just tears me apart. 2 of the kids that have had it that, were 2 of the biggest bulldogs, not the greatest stuff in the world, like I said earlier, but 82 to 83, but they would fight you in a heartbeat. And to see those kids standing there, because the other thing is, in college, you only have a 4-year window. In the pros, they can still get paid,
Hmm.
and do it. And, if he started his career, he has that, red shirt there. But when it happens to a sophomore or junior, and it's 15 to 18 months, okay, I don't ever want to see that again. I mean, that's just, I mean, that's a tragedy.
Hmm.
We try to do a thing. I mean, even though it's not necessarily popular, a lot of high school coaches and youth coaches will complain about the pitch smart system that's out there, developed of the kids not throwing only prescribed number of pitches and things like that. We do a lot of arm care things like with weighted balls and some things like that. The other thing is, again, this is where I think Division III helps too. I'm not concerned about their velocity. I don't care that they gain 5 miles an hour, because sometimes the programs to gain 5 miles an hour are the things that cause the injuries, and so like I said, we do a lot of arm care things, work with to try to hope not to. And I'm not bound by like the pitch smart rules that exist for youth baseball, but I've always followed them. Okay. And some of these coaches that'll bring guys back early, I admit, like I said, if it's a conference championship, a regional championship, something like that, and it's a senior, right, that's been there all along and he's begging for the ball, even though he's on short rest, yeah, I might do that. Okay. But a freshman, no way. Okay. Because I honestly, it's just something I just don't think I could ever handle seeing again.
Well, something hit me a couple of years ago. I was talking to a lady I was teaching. She was mentioning that her son was a pretty good ball player as a junior, looking to go to college. And I said, "What positions she does he play?" And she said, "He pitches." And I said, "Oh, cool. Does he have a good bat?" She goes, no, he's a PO. I said, what's a PO? And she said, pitcher only. I said, what? I just thought it was a joke. And all the big bad pitchers that I grew up with were great in the field. They had a great bat. They did more than one thing. And I thought, well, here's part of the problem. We're, specializing this crap at, high school level.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it's moving to. I mean, I've said too, I mean, I let pitchers play other positions, but I tell every recruit, ideally I'd like to have 12 POs, right? That's all they do. Because I do think that helps avoid injury. I think that might be another problem with some of the Tommy Johns is that, you can watch a guy's pitch count, but if he then goes and plays shortstop and fields 8 balls the next day, is that good for his arm?
Well,
I
what
think.
age do you develop a PO? Is that a college
Well,
thing or?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, pretty much, well, most of my guys, no, I'd say about half my POs were POs in high school.
Wow.
The other half was like, okay, we'll give you a shot doing this, but guess what? You're not going to hit at the college level. So how about just pitching? So,
Wow.
um, I don't know the answer to that, honestly.
So, and you're a baseball dad, your son plays baseball. So, what age? Because there's some people that I coach, their kids are good at baseball. And this kid, I don't know, 11, he threw me a ball. He goes, you want to see my curveball? And I said, no. And he said, why not? And I said, because you're 11 years old. He looked at me like I was a Martian. But at what age is it okay? Or does it matter about the physical side of the player that they could throw a curveball safely? Or is
Yeah,
it technique?
it's technique. It's also development of the kid, and that's the thing you need to understand. Kids develop in different ways. I don't think there's a chronological age. I mean, I certainly, 11 would be pushing it for me. But then again, you've got some 11-year-olds that are, 5'10", and developed and things like that. One thing that helped my coaching career a lot, um, when Cody was 13, his trout, and that's the year I moved to Franciscan. I was just recruiting that year, so it wasn't a team to coach. And coach got injured, and the owner asked me, could I take over the 13-year-old team? And I said, I haven't been with 13-year-olds in 20 years. I don't know. I probably not. He goes, oh, no. I said, I don't even really want to coach my kid either, he said, well, I'll help you. So, and I'm with him, and, first, it was late, when I got there. So it was the first game. We really didn't have a whole lot of practice. And I said, boy, that kid's nothing like his older brother, or that kid's nothing like, he says, you can't tell until they hit puberty. Okay. And players develop in different ages. So, I mean, it's not only that with respect to, how good they are in the game and making, evaluations on that, but it also goes to when you teach them at that, and I just think, if you're trained, if kid's bigger or stronger at 11, then maybe he can, and if he's not, there are technique things to do it rather than, to do it. So I don't, I used to have a hard and fast rule. I never threw one until I was 18, but at the same time, I was underdeveloped. So I think it's not something you can make a hard and fast rule on.
Okay, so you've been a college coach 35 years. Let's make this fun for people. How many times you've been thrown out of a game? How many times you got ejected?
Three,
Only three?
only three, can believe it or not. And here's the thing. One of them, I stayed in the game. So,
All
uh,
right, explain that.
okay, it was 1996. Actually, two of the times I got thrown out were in 1996, and that was the last one. Knock on wood, because due to have another one here coming up. But we were playing West Virginia State on the way to Florida. They were a Division II team, and we got up on them 3-0. Actually, they were NAI at the time, and we played. You could courtesy run for pitcher and catcher, things like that. And we were up 3-0 in the first inning, which was huge. They were nationally ranked Division II. I had my fastest kid pinch running for the catcher. He stole second. And pass ball, he got to third, and they had a big 6'6" lefty, big leg kick and everything going on. And, I had a little stopwatch on him. I said, Lips, I think he could beat that ball to the plate. He goes, I know I could. I said, well, let me see what happens. Right. And I'm thinking, okay, let's get this fourth run up 4-0 at the bottom of the first. We'll be good. Well, I sent him on a steal home. Yeah, and the batter took the pitch and they tagged him out. One of the stupidest calls I've ever made. So that ended the inning. There was 2 outs. We go up, we get him out when we're still up 3-0. Go to the bottom or the top of the second. Wouldn't you know, the guy at the plate hits a single, right, to do it. Well, Cal Bailey, Hall of Fame coach from West Virginia State, he goes out to the umpire and says, we're batting out of order. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, that kid struck out. I said, no, 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 no. It doesn't work that way. The count was 2-1. All right. And the umpire said, no, it was 1-2. I said, I'd be the biggest idiot in the world if I sent a kid to steal on a 1-2 count. You can't give a guy a take with 2 strikes.
Right.
The count was 2-1. And he said, no, it was 1-2. I said, then what'd you call him out for? Because the strike 3 would have ended the inning and you wouldn't care what the guy did.
Right.
And so we argued back and forth, and I was relatively calm, not swearing at him or anything like that. And he said, I've had about enough. I said, well, you got it wrong. Okay, can you check or whatever? And he said, well, that's enough. And so I walk in, and we keep 3 charts in there, and I said, and our scorebook. And I said, let's go look at this charts before I leave. And he said, okay. And then Cal comes over and says, that book's not official, and neither are their charts. You got to look at mine. And I figured, okay, I'm out of here anyway. Let's go see what happens, right? So we go over and look at his scorebook, right? And his scorekeeper put down, under his direction, put down K for the kid who just had to hit. And the umpire says, see, you're out of here. I said, no, look at the dots. The scorebook with the 5 boxes there.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, see, and he said, no. I said, then how did he get the 3 strikes? The guys had 2 balls and 1 strike right there. It's right there. And he said, no. And then finally the base umpire, right, turns back around and goes, he's right. Okay. Okay. And so they put the guy back at first base, and then I just went and sat in the dugout the rest of the day. My assistant came out, but I never left the field. Next inning, I figured, well, they didn't throw me out completely. You're supposed to leave sight and sound of the area. So next inning, I went back on coach third base for the rest of the game.
So he said he had enough of you. You're out of here, but then you kept it up.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it wasn't profane. It wasn't throwing a fit. I knew I was right.
Right. Well, that answers my next question. I was going to say, what's your most ridiculous ejection? So now I was going to ask this, that do you ever intentionally go out there and get really uptight with the umpire just because you want to fire your team up?
No, I think that's like 50s, 60s, 70s baseball. I think that has something to do with it. But, I mean, Murphy got thrown out 6 or 7 times the first year. Well, that didn't have anything to do with us playing better or anything like that. I don't think that that shows much. Plus, I've been an umpire for 33 years too. And I think you actually, you catch more flies with honey than you do with lemon type of thing. Now, you know me, I'm a kiss butt kind of guy, but at the same time, having been an umpire, that helps both sides of it, And if you know what to argue and how to argue it, I think that allows you to stay in more ball games. And to deliberately get thrown out, it's never been me. I never thought it would be, Now, the last ejection, official ejection, the ECAC championships in '96, that was the year they put in the slide rule, not the Posey rule, but another slide rule at the plate. My catcher got taken off the field on the stretcher due to getting bowled over at the plate, and he didn't enforce the slide rule. Now, and that one I have to go. And that one, and at the same time, when you see one of your players, being taken off the field on a stretcher, all bets are off right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to control your emotions at that point in time. I remember my AD called me and says, it's the ECAC championship. You really need to get thrown out like in the postseason and things like that. I said, you're right. I shouldn't have got thrown out. I should have decked him. Because
who cares?
I said, that's my player out there. I'm not going to do that.
Right. Well, I got to be considerate of your time. I've got a bunch of questions here. The state of baseball today. In Major League Baseball, as far as media goes, is there a media person that you see on TV or print guy that you really respect, and whenever he talks, you listen to?
I mean, Bob Costas is legendary, and he's out there. I mean, Ken Rosenthal, Tim Kirchin, Peter Gammons was, an all-time great. Yeah. And I think it's because they have integrity. They're not just trying to get the scoop on somebody. Obviously Joe Buck just, going in the Hall of Fame, Ford Frickle winner. I mean, I think that's the right way to answer your question. I'm not sure what you're asking, but
No, just basically somebody in the media that you respect. Those are all great guys too. Are you a fan of the DH?
honestly, no. Even though in college ball we've always used it, but I think it's just something that, as an old school guy, that's just something that changes with the times, and now you get used to it and go from there. I understand why MLB did it, and and like I said, in college we've always used it. So, I mean, but you're talking youth sports, whatever. I think the pitcher should bat there because you don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about the extra innings in Major League Baseball? Let's start the runner on second.
Putting it right now, absolutely not. Now, again, I understand from a pitcher standpoint. We're actually discussing it in our league a little bit. Every coach I go against says, no, no, we're playing real baseball, things like that. But you get a 17 or 18 inning game, and we play 2 9s in one day.
Mm-hmm.
If one of those goes 17 innings, you've really put your team at a disadvantage. Um, we're actually talking about some kind of hybrid thing, maybe going. And again, it hasn't been voted on yet or anything, but maybe playing 12 innings and then put the base runner on or something
There you
like
go.
that. So I think it should become, but no, I don't like it. I mean, because and it came about because of softball. And when I was out in California coaching, Lisa Fernandez was a softball pitcher, and I mean, she'd throw no hitters and lose. Because if you 0-0 and top of the eighth, they put a runner on and then bunt, sack, fly, and
It's over. Yeah.
and she loses. I mean, and I get it. That sport pitching was so dominating, but um, I I'm just not a big fan. So
Now, when the pitch clock came in, I asked a friend of ours named Mark who pitched in the bigs, and I said, what's your feeling on the pitch clock? And he said, well, I never liked it because if a pitcher of his was getting hit, he would tell the pitcher, take a little bit more time, just collect yourself. I, as a fan, like it because the game it goes. But what I can't stand is the pitcher's engagement to first. He's allowed 2 engagements to pick the guy off. He doesn't pick him off on the third attempt. The guy gets to go to second. What's your feeling on that? How do you tweak that? Because it seems like a huge advantage to the runner.
I I can't stand the whole concept of that. I mean, I understand pace of play, okay, but here's the main problem with pace of play. Okay, it's commercials, right? 2.5 minutes between innings. Okay, honestly, the hitters, but I'll fight to the death. And the hitter has a chance to get prepared when he gets into the batter's box, too, right? It's money is the reason why you needed it. Okay, and I know in the NCAA they base it off the College World Series in Omaha, and honestly, that's the most profitable of all the championships. And, it's because the TV and replays and all that other stuff. That's what slows the game down. I mean, yes, our game's slower than some of the others anyway, but totally opposed to it. I mean, they say we're going to get used to it. But then when you start looking at, I think the clock itself affects strategy. But now when you talk disengagements, you're starting to change the game,
Mm-hmm.
and not in a positive way. So I would agree with Mark on that 1,000%. I just think that's garbage. Unfortunately, though, I'm in the minority and I don't see it going away.
Yeah.
Um, unless you get big money for letting the games last longer. Especially as a Division III coach, though, pace of play has never been an issue. And to have a clock in our game now, we don't have the disengagements rule like they have in the MLB, but I just it's to me it's wrong. It's an overreaction to a problem, and
Yeah.
that's what happens.
I understand. Going to that, on top of it is the bases are 4 inches bigger. I'm thinking, well, that's 8 inches less I have to cover to steal second base. And I've got a bigger lead. I know when the guy's about to throw to first and to try to pick me off, but it's such a statistics driven league and sabermetrics. The two words that you hear all the time, velo and launch angle. It's like, okay, so that's about the pitcher and his velocity, the launch angle about how we're hitting home runs. As a manager, how do you stress fundamentals over that? Now, I know your kids aren't hearing about their velo and stuff on TV, but everybody's all talking about statistics. How do you deal with that as a manager?
Honestly, because I'm old, I don't. But what I try to tell the players, and then I heard this quote from Bill Mosiello, former coach at Ohio State. He said he gave a talk at the ABCA. He says, They didn't have launch angle and exit velo when Babe Ruth was playing, but you knew when the ball was gone. Okay,
It's out
even
of here.
Barry Bonds. Now his may have been aided, in other areas. I don't care what your spin rate is. If the ball gets plastered outside of the ballpark, I don't care what the spin rate was. It wasn't a good pitch. And you
Right.
don't care what the velo is if it's turned around.
Right. It's location. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a place for it in the game, and that's me being old, not being technically oriented to be able to come up with it, but at the same time, Cody playing travel ball, they bought one of those hit track things, so, we had the machine cranked up and the kids were hitting. Every time they took a swing, though, right, they looked, to the screen. Rather than figuring, hey, what's wrong with my swing? They wanted to see how far it went. And that's not all there is to the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or then they'd shift it, and then they had this one little thing there, though, that'd have been out of 20 major league ballparks or whatever, or they'd shift the ballpark like from Fenway to Camden Yards to Yankee Stadium. And again, the kid takes a swing, he stares at the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To me, that's just taken away from what the game should be about, you know.
Unless you're an
And
agent where he negotiates how many home runs you hit versus
yeah,
your
well,
average.
and again, talking to Coach Murphy when he was bench coach for the Brewers, he'd say, agents are ruining this game because you're not allowed to bunt some guys here or there, even though some of them can, some of them have to win a game. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember talking to him about Pedro Alvarez, former Pirate. That's his son-in-law, and I said, he leads off the bottom of the ninth and you're down one. Okay. You're right. There's nobody on the second base side of third base. Yeah, that's another thing. If teams are stupid enough to shift, let them. I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with that. I said, he didn't even have to bunt. He just angles the bat the right way, puts the ball on the left side. You've got your leadoff runner on in the ninth. Okay. And he said, well, the argument is the agent's going to say he's not paid to do that. He's paid to hit the ball in the ballpark. And I would argue, no, he's paid to help your team win games.
Right.
And that's just where misnomer comes in.
Knowing who his agent was, he was going to try to put one
Yeah.
in the river
Well,
instead.
I mean, it's,
Yeah.
again, and it permeates itself down to amateur baseball. And what I've seen lately in youth leagues is, they're teaching kids uppercut swings in T-ball. Okay. And I remember, when Cody was playing T-ball, a couple kids had some more homers. I said, well, they're bigger than you are right now. Don't worry about it. I said, when you get to high school, and if you play against them, I guarantee you're going to get them out every time. Right? Because that bat's going straight up and you're never going to do it. And sure enough, he struck them out, when they got to high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, but who cares how many home runs you hit off a tee when you're 8 years old? It's really a
Right.
frustrating thing,
I got a question. This is for one of my Atlanta Braves fans here that will definitely be watching this. If you were an owner, would you hang up a division banner? Like if your team won the division, if you're the owner, would you hang up a division banner or wait till you won the World Series?
Oh, hanging up before the World Series?
Or just hang it up because you won the division? Is that worthy?
Well, I do. I mean, like the Braves, for example, in the '90s. I mean, I wouldn't hang it up before the World Series, but as the year ended, you NL West champs for the next year. Yeah, I think there's something to that.
Okay.
Now I wouldn't put wild card banners or anything like that up, but I mean that's not participation trophy territory in my mind. Obviously I think it should be a lot smaller than the World Series banners, but they credit your Braves fan, for what they did in the '90s under Bobby Cox. I mean, that's pretty impressive,
It was.
especially in era free agency and things like that. It's just, I think it's definitely worthy. Pittsburgh, if we ever get one, I mean, yeah, they better hang it up because it'll be 30.
Or parade, right? I got to wrap up with some four-seam fastballs for you. So quick, 1 or 2 word answers. Who's the greatest hitter that you've ever seen live?
Pete Rose.
Pete Rose. We had some, I remember those double headers that we used to see, the big red machine and the Pirates. Who's the greatest pitcher you've ever witnessed?
Witnessed?
Yeah.
Bob Gibson, but Paul Skeens is coming up fast.
Okay. All right.
I never saw Sandy Koufax. Let's
Yeah.
qualify that.
Most amazing baseball play you ever saw, whether you didn't have to see it in person, but what's the most amazing baseball play?
Play or player?
Play.
Oh boy, that's a toughie. Just off the top of my head, I'd have to say Jeter's play in the '96 World Series when he cut the ball off. Now he was technically supposed to be there anyway. Only a coach would know that,
Mm-hmm.
but just the way he had it and saw it there. But I mean, there's so many. That's tough to get a quick answer for.
What about Dave Parker's throw? One of his two throws,
Oh,
All-Star game.
yeah,
Those are-
okay.
I remember
Like,
watching you jump off the couch. That was nuts.
yeah, I mean, Clemente had a couple. I saw them. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough to narrowify that to one play.
So we have a thing in the tennis world. We sit around and say who's the greatest ever, this, that. But we also like to say if there was one player that you had to put out there to win a match to save your life, who would it be? So my question is, if you needed one pitcher to win a game 7 to save your life, who would you send out there to throw? Any generation.
Wow.
See, we're deep, these tennis players.
Yeah, I don't know. The only name off the top of my head, well, there's several names, but the one I would probably say would be Randy Johnson, just because of the intimidating presence. But I can't go against Nolan Ryan, and one of my all-time favorites, because you're going to be in a battle, is Roger Clemens. So again, that's so tough to just say one. You know, but yeah, I'll go with the Rocket, just because I know he's going to fight every time out.
Yeah. Who's your all-time favorite baseball player?
Pete Rose.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Etch will be happy
I
with
mean,
that.
I love Clemente, but at the same time, Pete Rose, he got more out of his abilities than he ever should have. And I honestly, because how many people can have Clemente's athletic ability, like the strong arm
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, where Rose did it with sheer hustle, Charlie hustle, and a will, and that to me is, so I hated going, I was a Pirate fan. I hated going up against him, but, you know, he's all-time favorite.
Who's your favorite sports team? Any sport of all time. If you had to name one team, your all-time favorite team.
All-time favorite team. Probably the 76 Steelers.
Okay. Bring back PTSD from my Vikings in third
Yeah, I know.
grade, but
I
we'll move
had to
on
do
from
it.
there. That's all right. All-time favorite book, sports or otherwise.
The Bible.
There you go. All right. One last question, and I think we might need the Bible and some divine intervention. You're the owner. How do you fix the Pittsburgh Pirates? Or if you could control things from your chair, how do you fix the Pittsburgh Pirates?
Sell the team.
Who would you want to be the owner?
Oh, that's difficult. I mean, Cuban's from Pittsburgh. He's got Pittsburgh roots, but I'd probably say Donald Trump be the owner. 'Cause but they're starting to turn the corner. Some of their offseason moves. At least the GM knows that he's supposed to do things in the offseason this year. I was a season ticket holder for 28 years, so but I think they're moving in the right direction a little bit. But when you've got a guy like Paul Skeens on the mound, and I wouldn't fall asleep on Bubba Chandler, Georgia kid, I mean, he's going to be just as impressive. So you have to find some people to hit. But and everybody busts on Bob Nutting with the lack of spending. He's a businessman. You need to understand that, and the Dodgers and the Yankees, when they're getting 250 million for a TV package, well, what do you think your payroll is going to be? You can have a $250 million payroll without selling a ticket, right? And still make money, so, that needs to be corrected, I think, before anything, but I don't know. But honestly, he needs to bring in some major investors, be a minority owner. I know he wants to give it to his daughters and do things like that, but that's the best way,
Mhm.
but at the same time, you have to give him credit for being a smart businessman. Nobody's in it to lose money.
Well, I got to wrap up here. So I want to thank you for your time, bro. And
Oh, my pleasure.
so I got some great notes. The influence that you've had with your players, and many players have come up to me and told me what you mean to them, and this stuff you learned from Coach Murphy. Believe in yourself, as you're a lifelong learner. Never stop learning. You invented the mid-inning trot, and you are definitely a leader of men, which is pretty remarkable. So again, thanks for your time, bro.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, until next time. Make the most of your time and hang tough.